Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Thorne. I'm a program coordinator at Healthy Community Coalition in Farmington, Maine, and welcome back to MPHA's 2020 annual conference. I'm excited to be here today with Anna Corson, who is the Director of Advocacy and Community Partnerships at Full Plates Full Potential, and Andrew Hutchins, who is the Director of Food Services at RSU 9 here in Franklin County. Before we begin, I have a few reminders. We are now offering closed captioning. You can access this in the left-hand menu of the conference website. Please also remember to take the evaluation located on the session page where you entered the live stream. Also, if you have any questions for the speaker, please enter them using the Ask feature on the conference website, and we'll be taking them at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn things over to Anna and Andy.
Thank you, Ellen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our presentation today. I'm Anna Corson, and my co-presenter here, Andy Hutchins.
Hello, everybody.
So we'll be talking today about universal school meals. So in our state, we have a high number of children experiencing food insecurity, and school meals are an integral part of the solution to make sure that they have access to the basic nutrition that they need. So I work for Full Plates Full Potential, and Andy is involved in our work as well as our school nutrition directors across the state. So Full Plates Full Potential is a statewide nonprofit. We are on a mission to end child hunger in Maine by maximizing participation in USDA child nutrition programs. We believe strongly that no child should grow up hungry and that school meals are the best way to reach children with the nutrition that they need. So we work in partnership with school districts across the state, also with community organizations, local, state, and federal government and elected officials. So now I'm going to hand it off to Andy. He'll talk a little bit about school meals and some of the basic components.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. It's important to start a little bit with the history of school meals. And school meals started back in 1946 when Congress passed the National School Lunch Act. And the idea was to ensure that the children of the country had a good nutritious meal, a good nutritious lunch every day. And even today, we hear the term school lunch quite often. But school meals has been evolving over the years, and it's far more than lunch nowadays. So almost every single district in the state of Maine serves school breakfast as well. And many districts do meals through the summertime. In addition to that, there are a number of after-school meal opportunities, whether it be a snack provided for students who are after school for enrichment activities like sports or after school extra help with classes, clubs, programs, things of that nature. Also, some schools do an after school dinner meal as well for those students. We have many students in our district who are on campus here at the high school from 7:30 in the morning until 8 at night. So having meals available can be key for them. It's important to understand, that school meals is what we call them now, and that all those things are part of the school nutrition program. In addition to the ones I mentioned, there's one more I don't want to forget, and that's the fresh fruit and vegetable program, which if a school qualifies and has applied for the grant, allows districts to serve a fresh fruit or vegetable snack for children during the school day, which is a great way to introduce students to fruits or vegetables that they may not have been exposed to before. In fact, one day I was in the grocery store at our local Hannaford, and I had a parent come up to me and say, "Chef Andy, I want to thank you." And I said, "Well, what for?" And she said, "Well, my daughter never knew what a star fruit was before. And we were able to provide star fruit for a classroom through the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant. And her daughter just loved it. And mom was out at the grocery store buying some star fruit. So While she thanked me for the experience, she did not thank me for the price of the star fruit, but just a great way to get kids exposed to fruits and vegetables in another fashion. And that's usually consumed in the classroom, where the teacher can provide some sort of educational component about that particular fruit or vegetable of the day. So it's a great program. So school lunch has evolved to school meals. And it's important to note, before I go any further, that school lunch programs, while they're part of the school district and they operate within the school district, they also operate kind of in their own silo within the district. And what that means is, from a financial standpoint, school lunch revenues stay within the school lunch program, and expenses are paid from the school lunch program. So it's unlike many school departments where there's a line item in the budget for school lunch. With school lunch programs, we're a federal program and we follow federal rules. So there's lots of rules that go along with that. But one of them is that, no matter how much revenue a school lunch program has, the school department can't just come in and say, oh, you made $20,000 this year. We're going to take that and buy some new desks or new books or new office furniture. Any revenue that's made from a child nutrition program has to stay within the child nutrition program and be reinvested back into the program. Unfortunately, most districts in our state are not in a positive cash flow situation. So there aren't a whole lot of revenues left at the end of the school year once the bills are paid to reinvest back in the program. So in that case, the school district does subsidize the school meals program. So quick economics lesson for you as I've set that up. School lunch programs or school meal programs are reimbursed. Back up one slide if you would, please. Thank you. We're reimbursed a specific rate for each meal served. So we get X amount for breakfast, we get X amount for a lunch, and that can vary depending on what a student's lunch status is. And you can go ahead to the next slide if you would. There are 3 lunch statuses. There's free lunch, reduced price lunch, and paid lunch. Well, free lunch is just that. The student eats for free. No money changes hands. Pretty straightforward. The parent or family head of household, or the parent or guardian is the word I'm looking for, it submits an application each year to apply for the free meals or reduced price meals. And that application is processed, and if they qualify, they'll receive the free lunch or free meals altogether. If they qualify at a reduced rate or reduced price, then the family will pay 40 cents per lunch and nothing at all for breakfast. And then if they're a full pay student, they pay whatever the paid lunch price is. So the nutrition program is reimbursed by the federal government through the state, a certain amount of money per meal served, including the paid meals. So we get, I'm gonna have a little chart here for you, hope you can see that. So for every, sorry, this is like really old school, but a little economics. Let's say our paid lunch price is $2.50, and we have a reimbursement of 34 cents. And then we're also reimbursed basically in food instead of money, 23 cents per meal. So our total reimbursement for a paid meal is $3.07. Not bad, not bad. A restaurant would probably scowl at that number if they had menu items on the menu for $3.07. But for us in our world, that's not too bad. However, as I mentioned, all the expenses for a school nutrition program come out of the nutrition program's budget. So we have a target of 34% on food cost, the cost of our goods. We have a target of roughly 55% on labor cost, and that's our wages for our staff, their benefits and retirement packages. And then another 8% is the target for other costs. What's other costs? Basically everything else. If it's not food and it's not labor, it's everything else. So what might that be? It might be contracts for maintenance of refrigeration equipment. It might be communications, cell phones. It could be paper goods, cleaning supplies, those types of things. So once, I'll get my cheat sheet out here again. Once you add all that up, that leaves a profit of 9 cents at the end of the day for a meal. Profit of 9 cents. Most restaurants out there would laugh you right out the door if they made 9 cents on a plate of food. But that's the world we live in. And that's if everything goes perfectly. If our labor costs are in line and our food costs are in line, we don't have a lot of food waste, 9 cents a meal. So again, that's not too bad because our goal as a school nutrition program is to break even. You know, we're not looking to make a bunch of money. We really want to break even. So if everything goes perfectly, we have our 9 cents. The problem is if, let's say we need to replace an oven. The oven is getting old, it's broken down. That's about $6,500 for a brand new oven. So it would take us, give or take, about 72,000 lunches we'd have to serve just to replace that oven. So think about that for a minute. That's a whole lot of lunches. Why do I bring this up? Why are we going through this economic lesson? Because the key to it all, the key to success, financial success within a school meals program is to feed more kids. I had a superintendent ask me one time, Andy, why are you always talking about participation percent? Why is that so important? She said, I don't think it's anything wrong with a parent sending home lunch from home, and we don't need to feed every student. I said, no, you're right. We don't need to. And there isn't anything wrong with bringing lunch from home. However, for our program and the financial health of our program, we want to feed as many kids as possible. And the reason for that is the labor. It's the labor that's really a fixed cost. Yeah, we can trim our hours back a little bit. We can pay our people a little bit less money and have more staff turnover, which isn't a great solution. But it's really a fixed cost. So think about it at home. If you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 6 people, and all of a sudden, Aunt Susie and Uncle Bob call up and they say, hey, we're coming to Thanksgiving too, and we're bringing our kids. All right, so now you're cooking dinner for 10 or 12 people. It takes you the same amount of time and really almost the same amount of effort to produce that meal. Well, it's no different in school meals. It takes about the same amount of time and effort to produce a meal for 100 people as it does for 75, let's say. So if we can increase the number of students we feed on a daily basis, then the economics all work out. So not only do you have a financially stable school nutrition program, but you're reaching more children as well. So back to the eligibility levels, we want to feed as many kids, and we don't really care if they're free, reduced, paid. We don't even look at that, to be honest. We just want to feed them all. And the next slide, if you would, Anna, shows a little bit just briefly about the chart that we use to determine where a family's income needs to be to qualify for free or reduced. This one's a little complicated, this chart here on this slide. But basically, it means that if a family of 4 in the state of Maine needs to make less than $34,060, this is the one on the screen here is last year's chart. It changes a little bit every year, but for this year, just over $34,000 a year for a family of 4, and you qualify for free lunch. If you're under $48,470, you would qualify, again, a family of 4, you would qualify for reduced price lunch. And one thing people do forget is that every household, every member in the household counts towards that household count. So if you have a family, and this is becoming quite common these days, where it's maybe mom and dad and the 2 kids, but also Graham lives with us, and Uncle Bob lives with us, and even the college student who is commuting to school lives with us. So all those people count towards the household size. They're not all just students who are enrolled in that school district. But we live and die, as I said, by the participation. So school food service directors like myself all around the state are constantly monitoring our participation percentage to make sure that we're feeding as many students as we can. And the next slide, if you would. So we have, as a school nutrition department, we have a number of nutritional requirements that we have to follow as we build our menus and put together our meals. We use what's called the school lunch or school meals meal pattern, and what that is it in detail describes, and I won't go into all the details with you today because we'd be here for hours. But it defines the meal pattern as breaks it into meal components. So there are 5 meal components in a lunch. There's milk, there's vegetables, there's fruit, there's meat or meat alternate, and there's grains. So the regulations require that we serve whole grain rich items, meaning they're 50% or more whole grain rich. Within the vegetable category, all vegetables are not created equal, nutritionally speaking. So we need to serve and menu the variety of different vegetable subgroups throughout the week, including starchy vegetables, beans and legumes, green leafy vegetables, things of that nature. Fruit's pretty straightforward, and so all those components have a minimum serving size that we have to follow. And then in addition to that, what's on the menu, we have to ensure that we're meeting sodium targets and calorie targets for all of our meals. And then all meals in school nutrition programs are 0 trans fat. And one thing a lot of people don't know also is that when we purchase our food, there's a requirement that whenever possible, the food items on the menu are US grown, which is pretty cool. It keeps our American farmers working. So I have all the numbers here in front of me, but I'm not going to go into all the different sodium targets and calorie targets, because the other complicated thing I will share with you about writing a menu for K-12 is there's different requirements by age. So grades K through 5 have different requirements than 6 through 8, and grades 6 through 8 have different requirements than 9 through 12. So it can get pretty complicated when you have a big district with multiple schools. Somebody once asked me in a conference, or asked all the participants in a conference, if you can describe managing a school lunch program in one sentence, then jot that down and we'll share with the group. And I'm a visual person, visual learner, I prefer to draw rather than write. And this is what I came up with in describing how to operate a school food service program. It's just a maze of regulations and balance, and a lot of balance, finding what do kids want to eat, what will help with our participation, and what still falls within the guidelines. So it's a lot of fun, but it's taken me many years to learn all the ins and outs of the program, many more than I thought it would ever be, to learn all the regulations around school lunch or school meals programs. Next slide. So we'll pause here, and before we move on, to see if there are any questions. We kind of want to take questions in sections if we can. And before we move on to Anna's portion of the presentation, I'll answer any questions specifically related to how school lunch or school meal programs work, if anybody has one.
So we do have one question that's come through. So we had a participant who shared that they had heard a superintendent speak about the planning going on for preparing to reopen in the COVID era, and wondering how you are getting meals to students who are not attending in person.
Great, that's a very good question. So districts around the state, now that we've returned to open schools, have a number of challenges. Some districts have gone back full enrollment. So students are all back in the school, with the exception of those who are choosing full remote. And other districts like mine are doing a hybrid model where half of the kids come 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and the other half come on the other days. So that's posed a big challenge for us because in our district, we are only feeding half, we only have the opportunity to even reach half of the kids that we would normally reach. But specifically to answer your question, in our district, we are providing meals for parents who can pick them up at the school. We're offering a breakfast and a lunch they can pick up at the same time each day, and they can pick that up for that day, or they can pick it up for the following, for the following day if their student is going to be learning from home. So again, in our situation, we have some students who are full remote every day, and we have parents picking up meals every day. And then in other situations, it's kind of an every other day thing because of the way our hybrid model works. In some other districts, I've heard of opening meal sites in the evening. There's one district I was talking to the other day who's doing meal pickup in the evening at a fire station. So parents on their way home from work can pick up meals for the next day. Other districts are doing some home delivery. Some districts are actually packing out 5 days worth of meals, and parents can pick them up in a big box with some assembly required. So we're seeing a variety of solutions around the state in response to the models in which we've come back to school in this COVID era. Within the school, things have changed an awful lot. There are districts who are feeding in the classroom when they can space out enough to do that. Other districts who are feeding in the cafeterias are either increasing the number of lunch shifts so that the cafeteria is not so crowded. They're doing, complete meal pickup, so there's a lot less options in some cases, or customized made-to-order stations and things like that. It's all about turning those trays over as quickly as possible to get all the students through, because they've had to add lunch shifts. So COVID has posed a lot of challenges, but school nutrition programs around the state have just amazingly shifted gears and adjusted very well.
We don't have any other participant questions, but I do have one. So like you mentioned, this must be impacting your participation numbers. So do you anticipate that being a budgetary concern at the end of the year, or yeah?
Yeah, I really do. For us, in our situation, it's going to really hurt. We're currently operating under the summer food service program model, and I'll explain about that a little bit more later. So the reimbursements are very good, but the problem for us in a hybrid model is even if we fed every student that's on campus that day, we're only going to reach half of the students, and we know we're not going to feed every student. So our meal counts, daily meal counts, are down dramatically from the previous year, while at the same time we need to remain fully staffed so that if we go back to full enrollment at any point, we're ready to go. We can't be laying people off and losing our good team members because we're in this hybrid model. So we're running fully staffed, and we're just feeding less kids every day. Our participation rate as a percentage is up because everybody's eating for free this year, which is awesome. So if you look at it as a percentage, it's actually up, but our daily meal counts are down drastically. And inevitably, it will have a significant financial impact at the end of the year.
And then that leads me to just one more question I have about, are you seeing an increased cost per meal or for the distribution of meals because of COVID? Have you had to change the way you package or supplies you use or anything like that?
The costs, the biggest cost increase has been in packaging. So as I mentioned, we are doing remote, meal pickup for remote learners, and most districts are doing that in one way or another. So when you can serve a complete meal on a cafeteria tray, even if that cafeteria tray is disposable, but when you can serve that whole meal on a tray, you're talking about 10 or 12 cents. But to package a whole meal, individually wrap fruits and vegetables and put it all into a box and send it out the back door, you're closer to 70 or 80 cents by the time you're done. So the packaging is a huge increase in cost. And the food costs, while they haven't risen horribly, they do keep ticking up. Anybody that's been at the grocery store in the last year knows that. So food cost increases are a concern, but it's mostly the packaging.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Hopefully there'll be some relief for you guys. It's great to see the work that you guys have put into making all of these changes in such a short amount of time. That's it for questions that I have for Andy. So I'm assuming Anna, you're gonna take it from here.
I will. Thank you, Ellen. And Andy, thank you. I always learn something new whenever I talk to a school nutrition director, and I'm just always blown away by how complicated these programs are. And just also want to echo Ellen's appreciation of your incredible work in normal times, because school meals are not easy to execute in normal times, but during COVID, it certainly has been incredible to see how school districts and school nutrition programs have responded and have just continued to feed kids. And I'm looking forward to hearing more later in the presentation about school meals during COVID. So Andy mentioned participation rates a few times, and these are really, really important as a part of school meals and kids accessing school meals. So in order to get reimbursed, as Andy shared, a meal actually needs to get to a child. And across our state, participation rates tend to be relatively low. However, they're in line with other states across the country. So clearly there's something going on within school nutrition programs, within school meals, and just the design of the program, that only 42% of eligible students, so these are students who are eligible for a free or reduced price meal, would be participating in school breakfast. 68% of eligible students participate in lunch. Lunch is a little bit easier. There are fewer barriers to lunch because it happens in the middle of the school day, and it is a designated part of the school day. So fewer barriers do exist, but still, and that's a lot of kids not participating if only 68% of the eligible kids are. And then Andy talked about these great after school meal programs. So we have a relatively new program that a school, if they have high need, if 50% or more kids can participate, or I'm sorry, are eligible for free or reduced meals, a school can provide a supper after school. But currently only about 1% of the schools eligible to participate in this program are, so we're reaching only about 10% of eligible kids across the state. And then during the summer, only about 27% of eligible kids are accessing summer meals. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I will get into. So the work that we do in partnership with schools and nonprofits and local and state and federal governments is to really strengthen and expand participation in these school nutrition programs. And we do that by breaking down the many, many barriers that students and schools face in getting meals to kids, or for the kids in actually accessing the meals. So what are these barriers? They are similar for both the school nutrition programs and the students, in that they both struggle with time, whether that's time to prepare a meal, time within the school day to serve a meal, or time to eat that meal. So for a school, the schedule is very tight. And so during the course of the school day, it can be hard to work in enough time to provide breakfast. So breakfast is often served before school begins. And so if you're a student who's late to school, if recess is happening before school starts at the same time as breakfast, what ends up happening is that many students who really rely on that breakfast, even students who are hungry and have not had breakfast before they arrived at school, they may not participate in school breakfast. Another issue with time is if a school would like to change when breakfast happens, they may not be able to do that because the school day is already fully packed with really, really important, lessons and other parts of the schedule. So time can be a big barrier in that way. It can also be a barrier in a child actually being able to eat a full meal. So school lunch is usually 20 minutes or so. It has to be about 20 minutes in Maine, but you have to wait in line to get your meal, and that can lead to a very short amount of time to actually eat your meal. So ultimately that food needs to be getting into the child. We want that food in a child's belly. And so if they don't have enough time to eat, that's a big barrier. Money is also a barrier, both for a school nutrition program and for a child and family to access food. So for the school nutrition program, as Andy shared, they run on an incredibly tight budget. So that means that there's not a lot of extra. So he brought up, what happens if the oven breaks. That actually happens more often than you would think. Ovens break, refrigerators break, freezers break, and there's no extra money to replace that very crucial piece of equipment. Also, that tight budget means that the food that they can offer they can't always afford local food or some of the, higher priced fruits and vegetables. And so, the fresh fruit and veggie program that Andy mentioned is really helpful in that area. But it can be really hard to change up your menu when you have a tight budget. Also, for a family, if you don't fall into those eligibility guidelines that Andy mentioned, then you aren't eligible for a free meal or a reduced price meal, and you have to come up with the cost of the meal. Just because a family doesn't fall into those guidelines doesn't mean that they're not struggling. The guidelines don't really reflect, even though they increase every year, they don't really reflect the current cost of living. So there are many families who are just above the guideline for free meals or reduced meals, and it can be very difficult for them to actually afford a school meal. And every week that cost kind of builds and builds. A big barrier is access. So I mentioned if a child gets to school late, or if they need to go down to the cafeteria while their friends are at recess before school, that they really don't have easy access to a meal. And a lot of school districts can work on changing the way that they provide breakfast. So that can include breakfast in the classroom. So that would happen at the beginning of the school day when all the students are present, and it's a great way to make sure that kids are accessing breakfast. Everybody can eat together. You can also move breakfast to the hallway so that there, might be a grab and go cart in the hallway where kids are coming in right by the front door and they can grab their breakfast and take it to the classroom or eat it in the hallway. One of the biggest barriers that we see is the stigma of a child relying on a school meal or of a family needing that kind of help for their children to access the nutrition they need. And this is one that we see just permeating across school meal programs. We hear this across the state, across the country, that just the idea that you need a school meal can lead to a child just not participating in a school meal. They don't want their friends to know that they may be living in poverty. And oftentimes the school lunch line is the first time that realization happens, where a child may not realize that their family doesn't have enough money, but they realize that their friend does have enough money and that they're receiving a meal for free. So that stigma can be one of the biggest barriers. And then the other side of the coin is that there tends to be a very negative perception of school meals, that they are low quality, that they're not healthy. And as Andy shared, they have to follow very strict nutritional guidelines. And so, that perception is just that, it's a perception that school meals really are healthy. And there's also a lot of misunderstanding around these barriers that, with a tight budget, it can be really hard to change your menu. So stigma and perception are some of the biggest barriers we see. Another one is the capacity of a school nutrition program to really be able to get these meals out to kids. They may not have the skills or training to really know how to create a beautiful menu or chop vegetables in the proper way. And so, or they may not have enough staff, or they may not have the right equipment. So capacity can be a big issue. that's the same with skills. So the more opportunity that is allowed for school nutrition staff to attend trainings and professional developments, that can help to break down that barrier. And then lastly, school meal applications are a huge barrier for children and families to access school meal benefits. And they also can be a big barrier for school nutrition programs. So we've talked a lot about eligibility. In order to determine eligibility, every year families have to fill out a school meal benefit application and return it to the school district. For a lot of reasons, those school meal applications are often not returned. And so what that means is that there are quite a few students who aren't captured, that would not then be eligible for these free or reduced school meals. And then school nutrition staff ends up spending a lot of time sending out these applications, trying to follow up with families, really chasing down these applications, and then they have to process them. So I've heard from many school nutrition directors, and I'm sure Andy would share the same, that they spend a good chunk of the month of September on school meal applications, and that's a lot of administrative time that they could be used elsewhere. So here in Maine, we have a pretty high rate of child food insecurity. Before COVID, about 1 in 5 Maine children, so these are all kids between the ages of 0 to 18, experienced food insecurity. Since COVID, Feeding America projects that number will increase by about 40% statewide. And those numbers are just as dire across the country. In 2018, it was about 1 in 6 families that were families with children experiencing food insecurity. That has now increased since COVID to 1 in 3 families with children now experiencing food insecurity. And so last school year, about 43% of all public school children in Maine were eligible for free school meals. That's around 80,000 children in Maine. So again, that number is expected to increase due to COVID. And this is a shocking number. That's a lot of kids. But as we saw in one of the previous slides, that participation in school meals is very low, despite the fact that we have very high rates of child hunger. And this is due to all of those barriers that I was just talking about. So there are many consequences of food insecurity. It impacts cognitive development, learning, health, and our long-term economy in the state. So, it really is important to increase access to school meals, as this can help to alleviate this issue. So some of the consequences of food insecurity, chronic health conditions like obesity and diabetes, cognitive development is delayed due to increased toxic stress with adverse childhood experiences such as food insecurity. Students are often delayed developmentally. They have poor concentration and difficulty learning. And then there are these long-term economic consequences. So when a student has smaller gains in math and reading, they'll tend to fall behind their peers, and that just continues as they grow and develop into adults. So there was a study done by the Maine Education Policy Research Institute. This was quite a few years ago now. They haven't replicated this study, but I do think that these findings are worth discussing. So in 2014, they looked into the connection between poverty and achievement in Maine public schools. So they looked at low poverty schools versus high poverty schools. So a low poverty school is where 25% or more of the student population lives in poverty, and then a high poverty school is 75% or more of the student population living in poverty. And as you can see, reading proficiency in grade 4 in a low poverty school was around 74%. In a high poverty school, it was around 64%. So, there was already in 4th grade a 10% difference in reading proficiency. And what they found was, as those children went up through the grades, by grade 11, that disparity had grown to 30%. So, reading proficiency was about 62% in a low poverty school and 32% in a high poverty school. So you can see that the effects of poverty really do have deep consequences for students in our state. All right, so want to make sure that people are getting an opportunity to ask us any questions they might have.
Yeah, so I do have a couple of questions regarding reducing stigma and changing perception about school meals. So there's also a few suggestions here. So one participant suggested regarding changing perception, if info went out to all families at the beginning of the year talking about school meals and the health needs they meet and quality and all of that, and if someone from the nutrition department could talk to each classroom at the beginning of the year to ensure to the kids that the meals are healthy and to answer questions. And then for stigma, there was a suggestion about electronic records or cards paying for meals and how it shouldn't look different paying for a meal than someone getting it for free. That way we don't like out them. And I know that because I've had the pleasure of working with Anna in the past, I know you have some strategies and some suggestions for those things. So it'd be great to hear those.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, first of all, most school meal programs have gone electronic. So, students have a pin that they put into a pin pad or a card that they scan. So, there has been a lot of effort to reduce the stigma. However, there's still a stigma for a child who participates in school breakfast every day. It's just kids know that that child probably didn't get breakfast at home. So there's still, even with all of these strides in, trying to make school meal eligibility anonymous, there's still ways that students see who relies on these school meals and who doesn't. It's still this program that is very much intended for low-income children. And the goal is to make it for everyone because it is such an important part of the school day. Kids are in school all day. They're growing, they're learning. They really need these meals. So those suggestions, thankfully, have been put into practice. But we do still deal with stigma, which is just such a big barrier to overcome. And then Ellen, I'm sorry, do you mind reminding, the first one. So that is a great suggestion. And we, with a lot of our great partners across the state, we've tried to work with school districts to provide information that really does talk about the quality of these school meals that, so often school meal programs are working with local farms and providing local foods. And we have a great program in Maine called the Harvest of the Month program. There's actually funding to incentivize buying local food. And when you look at a tray, when you look at a school lunch in Maine, they are serving absolutely beautiful meals. We have amazing salad bars. I've had the pleasure of dining in many school cafeterias, and I've just always been so amazed and impressed with what they're able to do on such small budgets, as Andy shared. So I really think you're absolutely right. It is about marketing and positive promotion. And so that is an effort that is underway across the state, it's a pretty exciting effort to be a part of.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of strides made in marketing and outreach for school nutrition programs, but there's still a lot of work to be done. If you asked about perception, and if a school district menus let's say a steak and cheese sub, and it just says steak and cheese sub, that's what's for lunch today. That's one thing, but if you can write, lean shaved Western beef on a house-made whole grain roll with reduced fat cheddar cheese, now you're starting to sound like something a little more interesting and a little healthier. Both statements are true, but we need to go a little bit further in marketing our programs and using those descriptive words and identifying exactly what you're getting for your dollar, because the reality is that the food quality is not what we remember growing up when we were kids.
We do have one last piece of that too that just came through, talking about the applications and families who have difficulty filling them out. And I know that in like meeting families where they're at, so how we can help them with that. And I know both of you have done work on trying to make this process easier too. So I'd love to hear about how you guys have done that.
Yeah, Andy, do you want to start?
So
Talk-
that is always a
the lived
challenge.
experience.
Getting the applications back each year because they do have to be filled out every year. So there are some barriers, sometimes language or generational barriers. The applications can be a little confusing. So we've put out some frequently asked questions, information, some marketing to help support families. School districts having a nutrition webpage also helps to answer some of those questions in terms of filling out the application, but also an online version. You know, more and more folks are looking for that online solution, and the state of Maine recently partnered with a company to provide an online meal application solution for all districts free of charge, which was awesome. It integrates with our student information system. So that's been a great tool for us. But there's still gaps in the system. There's still people that struggle to get it in. They want the paper version, which is fine. And, you know, they struggle either filling it out or getting it back to us. So a great deal of time and effort goes into getting those applications every year.
And I'll add that a part of the issue is, again, stigma. That we have a lot of small towns in Maine where, we have very small school districts and everybody knows everybody. And if you are a family or a parent who, that you're eligible for these meals, but you also know everybody who works at the school, while these are very confidential forms, and especially, they're confidential when they're a paper form, they're confidential also when they're an online form. There's still just that stigma is just so deeply, it's always there. And so that can prevent a parent from filling out these applications. And we've also tried to communicate that these applications are important not just for school meal benefits for the individual student, but that the information gathered is very critical for the school district as a whole. There's so many federal programs outside of the school lunch and school breakfast programs that need a school's demographic information in order to provide the right amount of funding for academic programs. Title I funding is also determined by the demographic info that's captured in these school meal applications. So there's a lot of pressure on these applications, and all of that pressure is targeted at the school nutrition department. And so there's probably other solutions to how we can capture this information. And we'll get more into this in a little bit, but the topic of our presentation today is universal school meals, and the ultimate goal would be to just eliminate these applications and come up with a better way to capture that data for the school district.
Thank you very much. I know that that's been a big topic for a long time, is getting those applications in, and there's been a lot of work to make that process easier. So that's all we have for questions right now.
Great, thank you, Ellen. So as one of our participants mentioned, school meals have continued during COVID, and it's been really remarkable to see how school nutrition staff and principals and bus drivers and teachers just really came together to make sure that meals were continuing to get out to kids. And so I'd love to have Andy talk a little more about what they did in their district and what's happening across the state.
I will be very brief as possible, because I know we are getting short on time. But I just want to say that school nutrition programs all around the state and all around the country really overnight just flipped a switch and kept meals rolling once COVID hit. For our district, we found out on a Sunday night that we were shutting down. We came in Monday morning, made a plan, and on Tuesday we were rolling meals around the district. in school buses, home delivery, a number of different ways, meal pickup at school sites. And my district is not alone in that. It happened all over the country. And I just want to say it was amazing to me to see how quickly districts were able to make that change and how many meals they were able to get out there. We were very fortunate to operate under the summer food service program model. And what that means is that the meal pattern is a little bit less complicated, and really allows us to concentrate on doing what we do best and getting food in kids' bellies. So we were able to operate under that model through last school year, of course, through the summer, which is normal. And then the USDA has now extended those waivers right through the end of this school year. So we can operate under that summer food service model right through the school year, meaning it does not matter if you're free, reduced, or paid, you get a free meal for anytime you want one. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So as Andy said, school meals are free, and they have been since the middle of, or maybe early April, when COVID started, and they are continuing. And this is something that child hunger advocates, school nutrition staff, so many folks across the state and across the country have wanted for a long time. So basically, we are seeing universal school meals in action right now. So universal school meals just means that it doesn't matter, as Andy said, it doesn't matter if you're eligible for a free meal, a reduced meal, or a paid meal. And in Maine, we've actually gone almost halfway to universal school meals. So last year, the state legislature passed a law and included funding in the state budget to have the state pick up the cost of a reduced price meal. So there are about 11,000 families who no longer have to pay that reduced cost for school lunch, and that was actually done years before for school breakfast. So we're part of the way there now. Universal school meals will remove some of the hugest barriers that we face in food access for kids at school. So in 2017, there was a study done of New York public schools, and they found that only a third of eligible students were taking part in school meals, and the other 2/3 were not eating due to stigma. So again, by making school meals for everyone, it removes the stigma, and it's the only part of the school day that some kids pay for and some do not. I mean, a child doesn't pay rent for their desk. They don't pay gas money to get on the bus. So making school meals a part of the school day and for everyone really does remove that huge barrier of stigma. Universal school meals can also increase access to school meals by making it easier for school nutrition departments to institute best practices like breakfast in the classroom. If you don't have to track who's paid and who's free, it's much easier to bring teachers on board to have breakfast happen in the classroom as a part of the school day. It's really asking a lot less of them than if they have to track who's paid and who's free. So also, when you have free meals for everyone, more students participate in the program. And there are many studies that show that the more students who participate in school meals, that there's a decrease in food insecurity for those students and their families. It also allows school nutrition professionals to focus on feeding kids. That it frees up all of this time that they spend tracking down school meal applications and collecting school meal debt from families. Instead, they can focus on menu planning and culinary skills and sourcing food that is higher quality, and also professional development. And so it really, ultimately, that is their business, is to feed kids. And so it gives them more time to do that. And also it normalizes school meals as just a valued part of the school day, instead of having school meals be a program that is intended for low-income students. And it also improves health and academic outcomes for students, especially low-income students. There are studies that show universal school meals leads to an increase in test scores. improved concentration, quite a few studies that show a reduction in obesity when more children are able to participate in school meals. And also, we hear from teachers that there's better behavior and concentration in the classroom. School nurses report fewer hunger-related visits. Often kids go to the nurse with stomach aches and headaches, and it's because they haven't had enough to eat that day. And then also principals report fewer disciplinary office visits. So ultimately, it's all about access. In this country, we have the money and we have plenty of food to feed every hungry child. And making sure that they have access is really one of the biggest barriers. So universal school meals can ensure that more kids have access to school meals. So, and I know we've gone a little bit over. Are there any final questions?
I do have one more question. So a really great question from a fellow Let's Go coordinator here. Now that meal waivers have been extended and students have access to free meals for the school year, a lot of families are wondering if they should be taking advantage of this and are worrying about taking meals and funding away from families that need it. Do you have any talking points to share around this?
Andy, do you want to jump in? I know, the more families that participate, the better. So that would
Sure.
be, yeah.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough that by taking advantage of a free meal provided under this program, it does not take the food out of the mouth of anybody else. The Congress funded summer food service program meals right through the end of the school year. It's fully funded. And if those funds don't get used, then they go away. And that's not to say we should be wasteful and not be mindful of the taxpayer dollar. However, nobody else will go hungry because somebody's taking advantage of those meals. We want to get as many meals out as possible. And if it can supply a meal for a child and help with the family's grocery bill a little bit, then that's a great thing too.
Absolutely. And I would also, as a mother working from home right now, I think that for, parents and working families, things have become so much harder and more complicated. And it almost seems like there's less time all of a sudden. So, these school meals can be such a convenient way. They're prepared, they're ready, so easy to just, give your kid a really healthy breakfast and lunch. So that would be another good talking point.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. That's all I have for questions. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Only last I'd like to
go ahead,
say,
Andy.
if I may, real quickly, as Anna had mentioned, the cost of handling free and reduced applications. And I did a little the number crunching and a little study in my district. And if we eliminated the processing of applications and all the paperwork and verification and all the stuff that goes along with that, it totaled a little over $40,000 a year that we spend just on that process. And if we eliminated that, I could take every frozen and canned vegetable and fruit off my menu and replace it with fresh all year long and still break even. So that's pretty impactful.
Absolutely. That is Andy, I'm going to need that in writing so I can share that far and wide. That's incredible.
Agreed. I did just have one other question come through that's really great. Can families who withdrew from districts this year to homeschool still participate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Under the summer food service program, we feed children, not students. So it doesn't matter if they're not of school age yet. They may be homeschooled. They may be go to a private school that doesn't provide meals. Any child 0 to 18.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's such a great tidbit. I did not know that either. And so thank you both so much for joining us. This has been a really great session. Very valuable work that you do. And we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you being here with us today. And thank you to all of our participants. Please be sure to complete the session evaluation afterwards. They're very helpful for us. We will be back shortly with another great presentation starting at 2:10, talking about nutrition education beyond the pre-K and elementary classroom with SNAP Ed in the Garden. We have some great speakers joining us, and we hope you stick around.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ellen.